So how do we avoid burnout as the dungeon master? Because the dungeon master in D&D, that's an awesome role, a lot of fun. You're creating a lot of great memories, a lot of great stories, narratives, adventures, but there's a lot of responsibility. I mean, just do the breakdown. You're there to run the game, so you're like the analog/DM computer. You're there to tell the story, resolve the rules, figure out what the players can and can't do, being fair, and making sure that every player has a vision, a voice, is welcome and heard at the table. That's where most players stop. If you're like, Fritz, name what the DM should do, that's what they'll name. And a lot of DMs will name that also. I always add to the list, as a DM, you're there as a player also. You're there to have fun. You're there to create the story, just from a different perspective, from behind the DM screen. You're controlling characters too, the NPCs. You're controlling the monsters. You're controlling the narrative. And it's interesting to see as a different type of player, the choices the players make and how that impacts the story, the adventure. Even if you're playing a pre-written adventure, things can often be taken in directions that you just never expect. So always remember you are also a player. Never forget that. You need to have representation at the table too. I find when you have that, that's the first way to avoid burnout. You need to be a little bit selfish and say, am I having a good time running this? Because if you're not, then not only do you burn out, just the games aren't at your best. The games might not be productive, and other players are not going to have fun. The second aspect I would say, and the most important aspect as a DM, and this is hard, if you are playing in a public support group, meaning if you're part of a store that every Thursday is D&D night and people can randomly sit down at your table and play, we want to make new friends. The social aspects of D&D are everything. We want to sit down and have a great time playing. So I want 10, 15, 20 players at my table. I mean, I average about 8 to 10. I'm never going to turn anyone away. You know, my number one rule is everyone has a place at my table as a player. But this idea, it's easy to think, well, I want to get players, so I'm going to run the types of adventures they want. The challenge here becomes, as a DM, we're trying to find our vision and our voice. We're trying to unlock that passion. What type of adventure makes you full of passion? That type of adventure is what you are going to utilize, that passion, to make a memorable adventure, to make it so it's like, wow, this is an amazing DM. This is an amazing adventure. I can't wait to next week. In order to do that, you got to follow the checklists we talk about, but you got to be passionate. You got to be ready. You got to look forward to being a DM. So what I recommend, and you got to be a little draconian on this, a little bit selfish, only run adventures you like. Whatever your DM style is, whatever your player personality is, run those adventures. If you like, and I'm kind of bookending it here, if you like mass combat, mostly combat adventures, run that. If you like intrigue and maybe there's one encounter in the whole evening, you know, roll for initiative once, the rest of it is skill checks and back and forth, talking and role playing, run that. And, you know, most of us fall somewhere in the middle. If you really enjoy dungeon crawler adventures, run those. If you enjoy city adventures, run those. I mean, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but what you enjoy running, play that. Now, the side note to that is, if I like, and I'm just going to really simplify it, if I like running dungeons that involve combat and there's a dragon at the end of every dungeon, every 10 games, 8 of those should follow that format. 2 of the adventures, or every now and then, run an adventure that's outside of your comfort zone to mix things up, to explore new narratives, to play with different things and elements in the Dungeons and Dragons universe, but not so much that you're not having a good time. We want to avoid Dungeon Master burnout. That's kind of the script that I like to follow. That's the element. Those are the elements that I like to look at. In your opinion, as a DM, how do you not burn out?